Thank you for joining us for our Industry Insider webinar series. My name is Pam Persichetti. I am the Alumni Engagement Officer at the college. And tonight we have with us Elisa Torres, and she is an 08 graduate of TCNJ. She's a business school grad as well as a minor in Spanish. And Elisa is joining us from Singapore, which is incredible. What's that?
I was just doing a dance.
Yes, which is incredible considering the time difference. So we are really appreciative of her flexibility and being so accommodating. I think you get the award for furthest webinar participant, and I don't see anyone rivaling that anytime soon. So thank you very much for joining us, especially from so far away. So Elisa's been in Singapore for a little over a year as a senior marketing manager with Johnson & Johnson in the Asia Pacific and Japan territory. So that's what takes her to Singapore, and I think she will share a little bit more about that with us. In addition to her work at Johnson & Johnson, she also launched a website, Elisa Speaks, where she shares information and on empowerment of women in their professional life and life in general. And also on that website, she shares some of her work, some of her passion project work, which is anti-human trafficking. So you'll find that on elisaspeaks.com as well. And she's very successful in her work as a marketing professional, as well as a TEDx speaker and other corporate engagements that she's spoken at. So I want to turn it over to her again. In case I have any technical difficulties, I had to shut my, keep my introduction a little shorter than I would have liked to. But Elisa, thank you for joining us. And she's going to share with us a little bit about how she got to where she is in her professional life, and some tips and tricks on how you can make it work for yourself.
Thanks, Pam. So 4 years ago, I was standing in an office across from a global vice president at Johnson & Johnson. And for some context, this vice president is very revered and influential in our organization. And we were talking about an opportunity I had recently to speak at our company town hall. Now, by this point, when I'm speaking to her, I have been with the organization for 8 years. I won many awards. I was really networked, I thought. A lot of people would come to me to help with projects or to give advice. So I'd been there a while, so I thought I had, a pretty good brand for myself. So we're in her office and we're talking about the town hall. And she says, that was the day that you arrived at this organization. And I was flabbergasted because I thought, well, I thought I had been doing pretty well before. I mean, I work really hard. I always deliver my results. How could that be? She introduced me to the PI framework, which we're going to go through today. And I'm really excited to share with you. But just by way of introduction, my name is Elisa Torres, and I did graduate from TCNJ actually in 2008. And as Pam said, I am speaking to you from Singapore. But first, I just want to give some love to TCNJ, which was truly a springboard for me in my professional career and also in my personal life. So on the personal front, 2 of my siblings and myself graduated from TCNJ. My sister met her sweetheart at TCNJ. She's on the line, I believe. And I met my 2 best friends there, who should also be on, otherwise we will no longer be friends, but I think they're on, they did text me. So I have a lot of love for TCNJ in my heart. And then on the professional front, I did major in marketing. So I graduated from the School of Business. And I had the opportunity to have 3 undergrad internships during that time. And those were procured from different means. So one was through Inroads, which was a program that focuses on minority talent and placing them in Fortune 500 companies. One was procured through TCNJ, which was a marketing internship. And then one was through networking. I also made sure to take advantage of the Office of Career Counseling. So if there's any people on the line that are still at TCNJ, do make sure you do that. I had the wonderful and awkward pleasure of doing the recorded interview sessions where you get to watch yourself back, and it's very cringeworthy. But that did help prepare me to go out and get my job, which is where I landed at Johnson & Johnson. So just a lot of love and nostalgia when I think about TCNJ. So thank you so much, Pam and Amy, for having me. A bit about my career path. I started, as I mentioned, really right out of college or before college as a marketing intern. And my focus there, as I look back over my career and the roles that are listed here, and the piece of advice I would give you is I try to make sure that every role I take will simultaneously stretch me so that I always feel like I'm just trying to stay above water just a little bit, but not drowning, and still allow me to add value. So I want to have one foot in something that I know and then still have the opportunity to grow and feel uncomfortable. Because if you're comfortable, then you're not growing. So I try to lean into that feeling, maybe sometimes too much, hence how I got myself to Singapore. So after I started as a marketing intern, I moved into our sales organization and I held several roles there, representing different products and medical devices. So we sell and manufacture products that are used for cardiac surgery, oncology, neurosurgery, you name it. And I worked in a number of different geographies before moving inside to sales training, where I could leverage that knowledge I had as a sales rep, but then start to really learn the inner workings of the organization. Which then led me to marketing, which was ultimately my goal. I'm in my third marketing role now, and that's been amazing because you really sit at the center of the organization and help set the strategy and make sure that the other functions that you're working with are aligned to the strategy that you've set for your product or your brand. So in my role currently, I've been here just over a year here in Singapore. I'm building the digital marketing strategy for the region, and that includes all the 13 countries in Asia, which definitely keeps me on my toes. I've learned an immense amount, and also I've been able to add, I think, a lot of value. And I'm excited to see where my projects and the initiatives we're launching will lead the organization, because I truly believe in the products that we make and that it's really the best that we could be doing for the patients that we serve. So that's a bit of my, my career and some background. And now let's jump into it. So the PI framework I alluded to a little bit before was what the VP had mentioned to me that day when we were speaking. And back to the town hall, the presentation I gave. So they had asked me to come in and speak about 2 new products that we had launched at the time that I was doing really well in, but the rest of the organization wasn't as much selling as much as they liked to, and perhaps didn't know how good the products were. So I could have treated that like a normal presentation, which I would have just shared some slides, explained the benefits, the pros, the cons, and how to use and how to sell the product, like you would normally see in a presentation. But I decided to treat it and craft it more like a mini TED Talk. And I wanted to go in and make people feel inspired. And so rather than rattle off all the benefits of the product, because everyone pretty much knew those, I took a risk. So that's your first pearl I want to leave with you is take risks when you can, not always, but when you have your performance under control and you have enough, I would say, political capital to take a risk, you should. I used a bit of humor, I used a bit of emotion. I brought in some storytelling elements, and that really set me apart, as I found out later that day, and gave me a lot of exposure to many leaders in the organization. So I'm grateful for that town hall and that opportunity, though I didn't know how important it was at that time. And so that's a key takeaway, I think, for those of you listening, that you can take anything and really use it to distinguish yourself and build your brand, being authentic and true to who you are. So you shouldn't copy what someone else does or what I am going to give you as examples. Think about how you would show up with your strengths and your personality. The 3 components of the framework are performance, which I'm sure people are thinking, how is that only 10%? And I will explain. Image, which is 30%, and exposure, which is 60%. And this will vary, I would say, depending on where you are in your career, where you are in a role, for example, if you take a new role. But the main takeaway from this is really the weighting and how heavily weighted, if you're looking at furthering your career and being a more known entity in your organization, is that it's not enough just to do your job. You have to account for your image, so how people perceive you, and your exposure, which is who knows you and who do you know. Performance. This is probably the most concrete thing. It won't be so abstract to you because this is what you're doing on your day-to-day job, and then some. So you should always look to add value to the organization where possible, go above and beyond, or take a risk or try something new within your day-to-day activities. The main thing I want to stress also is that you constantly have to build, I find, sweat equity. So there's really no shortcut. You could think, for example, you've been with an organization, in my case, for 12 years. A lot of people know me, but when I took this role, for example, when I moved to Singapore, I essentially had to start over because I'm now unknown again. And so my performance mattered again, as it always does, but really critically there because people don't know who you are. So there's really no shortcuts. And I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to really, those of us that are employed, gainfully employed, to really appreciate those opportunities and know that really the organization doesn't owe us anything. It's quid pro quo. So we're being employed and we need to make sure, and we should make sure we're showing up with pride and doing a really good job. When you first start in a role, as I mentioned, I would say performance is 90% of the pie because people want to know if you know what you're doing. And you probably feel that sometimes in roles where maybe you feel a little bit judged or people are maybe harsh in the beginning or not as helpful as you might want to be. It just depends probably on the culture of the organization you're with. But it's really important that that is always under control. So I'm not saying when it's 10% that it doesn't ever matter. It just becomes, over time, it becomes expected. In every organization, you have your top high flying performers, more your middle of the rung, and the bottom performers. Once you're in this sea of top performers, how are you going to differentiate yourself if you're all now performing well? And that's where these other elements of the pie come into play, because there's nothing really differentiating you once you're all working at your most elevated self. So just some examples of pitfalls to avoid, I would say. So once you have you're performing well and you think you're doing well in your role, just some pitfalls to avoid and some mistakes I've made or seen others make. The first is assuming that your success will transfer with you. So back to my sweat equity comment. I made this mistake early in my career. I was a sales rep in Long Island for a few years. And when I started there, I was in fear and trembling. I was so nervous. I was 21, calling on surgeons who were 2 or 3 times my age. And I worked really hard to earn their trust. And I was the first one in, the last one out, so on and so forth. And then I moved to New Jersey, where now I had a little swagger about me because I had some success in my prior territory. And I was still hardworking, but I forgot that though I had more confidence, it didn't mean that customer group or my team had the same amount of confidence in me because they didn't know me. And so I had to go back to the performance piece, build sweat equity again. And I made a grave mistake, actually. I assumed that I had built a level of trust with a specific customer, and the meeting did not go well. We'll just say the meeting did not go well, but I had that lesson for life. So, you know, I don't count them as failures, they're learnings, and I carry them with me in every other role. So when I moved to Singapore, I knew that. I had that front and center. And so I spent a lot of time making sure that I was building trust, that I was first one in, last one out, and performing to the best of my ability. And then over time, people, of course, will come to trust you. And then you can get back to your sort of image and exposure and having fun and trying new things. Another pitfall to avoid is keeping your learnings to yourself. I think I've done this well throughout my career, and it is the best pearl I can give you. So if you're someone in a role and you feel like no one notices you, you know, you're working really hard, but you're not getting perhaps the exposure you want or the credit for the work you're doing, I think the best way to do this is to help the team. So if you have launched a new product or you're in supply chain and you found a new way to save money, you could summarize those learnings and share them with your leadership or with your peers. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all emotional people. We all want to belong and we all want to do a good job for the most part. So if you share with people versus saying, look at me, right? That's very different. You're adding value to them and you're simultaneously being able to show really how great you are. So don't keep your learnings to yourself. And then the third one I would say is really important is not to assume that people are going to come find you to promote you. It's something I read about, or I was talking to a friend about in Lean In, which is called the Tiara Syndrome, where people feel if they work really, really hard, someone's going to come and place this said tiara or give you a promotion or a raise, and you won't have to ask for it, and your performance is enough. And I could tell you that that couldn't be further from the truth. So you definitely need to advocate for yourself. And you should know that. That's the one thing I want to really empower everyone with is, I love this quote, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. And so if you find yourself frustrated, which I have many times in my career, you should know that it is changeable. You can control it. You can control the company you work for, the industry you work for, or within your organization, how people become aware of you and what your brand is. So this image and exposure piece will be really critical in making sure that that happens if that's your goal in advancing in your career. We'll move to image. And this is, of course, about your attire and physical attributes, but it's about a lot more. But I will keep one point here on the attire and physical attributes. It is really important, I would say, to invest in very good basics and pieces of clothing that you can use. So good blazers or suits, shoes, making sure that you're always well kept in terms of hair, makeup, nails, so on and so forth. Because even though you might be so wonderful in your performance piece, unfortunately, it's the day and age we live in, you really are judged by your attire and your physical attributes. So over time, I've just invested in good quality pieces. We can let go of the Forever 21s and ASOS and all those things and really just invest in those good pieces. And then beyond that, which is really important, is your personal brand and reputation. And this is when people think of you, what are the first things they think of? So are you known to be solution-oriented, positive, optimistic? Or are you like a curmudgeon and you just come in and put your head down and don't work for the rest of the day? Don't speak to anyone for the rest of your workday. So you can really control this. And the great thing is you can shape this. So when I started 12 years ago, my marketing internship manager told me that I was not going to be a good sales rep. He's like, I don't see you as a salesperson. You're not bopping up and down around the halls talking to people. And I really don't think that's your strength. And he was probably right from what he had seen of me till that point. So I was so nervous that I wouldn't show my full personality. And I would be like nervous to speak up in meetings. And so he was right of his perception of me, but that wasn't the fullness of really who I was. Therefore, it's important to make sure you have the right people speaking into your life. So lucky for me, my brother, who's a TCNJ alum as well, said, no, I know you can do this job. You have these specific attributes, just go for it. And sure enough, it was true. So I then had to kind of reinvent my brand and make sure that I was stepping forward and showing who I was instead of just shrinking back in timidity or fear, even though I still felt fear. And you always feel fear, I would say. I'm nervous now. It doesn't mean you don't go and do it and put your best foot forward. The last thing on image here is also how you make others feel. So it's not only your results and your performance, but how do people feel when they're around you? And are you nice and kind and do you share and create a really positive culture on your team? Those are things that you can also control. So a couple of tips here are to show your personality and your passion. In that same internship, I got a lot of feedback in that internship, God bless it. And I had another manager tell me, he said, you should be interested, but also interesting. And I think you're gonna have a problem being interesting. And he was basically saying I was boring. And he was right, because again, I was really timid and really shy at the time, if you can believe that. So you want to make sure that you try to get a blend of both. So being interested is just really being interested in your field, in your team, in your leaders. Be a master of your craft. So if you're a marketer, read all the marketing books, listen to the podcast, subscribe to Harvard Business Review, right? What are the things that people are talking about and happening in your field so that you have a point of view? And then you want to be interesting, or maybe I reverse those two. You want to be interesting by reading and doing all those things. And then you want to be interested by asking about your team and your peers and what they all think and what their opinion is and how are their kids, and making sure that you have a good balance of the both. And then what I try to do is incorporate some of my hobbies and passions, because that's going to make me more memorable. It's going to make you more memorable. So just two examples of things that I've done. Again, assuming you're performing, so you always have to be performing. Otherwise, people will say, well, how did you have time to go do XYZ, but you know, your day job's not getting done. So that always has to be done. So once when I was in marketing in the US, I was on this like health binge thing, and I went vegan and I was juicing, and I know we've all been there and we talk about it to everyone that will listen, but I was really excited about it. So I brought my juicer to work for our, we'd have a monthly marketing meeting, and I made fresh juices for everyone. Like I took it downstairs, you could smell it. It was like a really fun experience. It smelled so delicious. And then I named them like fun little, like the J&J Green Mean Machine. And I made some up about our competitors. And people loved it. Like they walked in and they were like, oh my God, this was so nice. We really, really, you know, appreciated that you did this for us. And that was authentic to who I was. Like I just really wanted to share that. But it also helps set the culture in the department, right? I was giving freedom in a way to other people to say, you can show up the way you want to show up too. And what do you want to do? Do you play an instrument? So in the next meeting, we got like a band together and we all sang, and people were like hugging and laughing, and we started to incorporate fun elements. So culture, especially as a leader, even if I don't have the title of a VP, I carry myself as a leader because I know I can influence that and I want to. Is a way that you can manage your image and also get yourself more exposure to other people in the organization. The second example is I went on a mission trip a few years ago now to Eastern Europe for anti-human trafficking work. And that was a really difficult trip, but my team was so amazing and they wanted to hear about it when I came back. So I put together a presentation just for my immediate team. And that led me to get an invitation to the Women's Leadership Initiative to share at that resource group, which then led my boss to nominate me to give a TEDx talk. And that was never in the cards for me at all. I didn't even want to go on the mission trip, to tell you the truth. I just thought it was I wanted to go, but I knew it would break me. And I ended up going, and it was a big blessing because I created a lot of awareness and still do for human trafficking. We fundraise a lot of money. And then it gave me that opportunity on the TEDx stage, which was amazing and huge for my career, which I never could have reverse engineered. But I say that to inspire you all, because what is it for you? So I was coaching a gentleman a few months back, and he was really into fitness. And I'm like, well, you should bring that to the department. Why don't, for those of you, right, everyone's working from home now, let's say that's yours. You could decide that you're going to host a Zoom workout once a week for your team. You know, people are nuts and bored and just stressed and all of these things. What could you do that incorporates your personality, your passion, and will add value to the team? That's my challenge to you on that front. And then you want to conduct an image audit. I have done this. It is a little bit awkward, but highly recommend. Is list 5 adjectives that describe your image. Keep that for yourself. And then email or ask your supervisor, mentor, or close peers to do the same. And then compare and contrast that list. And you might see that maybe there's some strengths you weren't aware of. Maybe they say, you know, you always lighten the mood and you really help me when I'm stressed. And maybe you didn't know that was something you did. Or maybe they say you talk over people all the time in meetings and you feel terrible and you didn't know that. So that's something that you can then work on. And the key to this is follow back up with the person, so people know that you care and that you want to change. So you can then say, you told me that I speak up too much or I don't speak up enough in meetings. I've really been working on that. Thank you so much for your honesty. Have you noticed a difference? And that gives you the ability to show you care, continue to get feedback, and it's going to set you apart from your peers, because most people don't do that, to tell you the truth. So that's on image. And then our last pillar here is exposure. And this speaks to your participation in the formal and informal channels in your organization. So I'm sure we've all experienced that a job gets posted, and before it's posted, just you should know, if you don't know this, they already know pretty much who's going to get the job, right? Because these conversations are being had in the informal channels in the organization. And people that are already top of mind that have been doing this other performance and image and exposure piece are likely going to make that short list. And if you're interested in the role, by the time it gets posted, more likely than not, it's too late. You can still try, but more likely than not, they already have identified their top candidates. And this is where I say networking is critical. And I get a lot of feedback from people that think it's disingenuous, or they'll hate on the person that got the job, and that leader only hires people they know. But I'd like you to just take a step back and think of the leader. And if that were you, you have a lot of pressure as a leader to deliver, to perform, and to get a team, a really winning team together. So if you were that person, would you want to hire an unknown entity or someone that you know personally or comes highly recommended? You're going to go with the person that you know because, again, you have a lot of stress and you don't need to manage someone that's not going to be the best that they can be for your team. So I don't find it disingenuous. I see that our organizations do not actually have enough talent. Some people feel there's a lot of competition. There are, I would say, in some elements. But if you're really good at what you do, you're a master of your craft, you're investing the time to continue to learn, working on getting exposure, then the competition is you. How much can you keep elevating the game on yourself to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position to be thought of? So I view it as really important, and I view it as letting them know what I think I bring to the table, because I know that they have a gap in talent in certain areas, and I know these are my specific strengths. I'm not good at everything, but I'm very good at launching products. I'm very good at setting strategy. I'm very good at inspiring people. I'm very good at being detail-oriented and taking a macro view. And so I just view it as connecting with people so that when they have a need down the road, they might think of me. So I really encourage you to do that. And I'm going to give you some tips because it will be the biggest differentiator for you. I'm sitting in Singapore today because really of one person who I worked on a project that wasn't really that big of a deal, I didn't think, but I took a risk and this creative approach and it landed on his desk. And he's very, very senior in the organization. And that's why I'm in Singapore. So people always say, oh, it's not fair. It's all about who you know. And it is about who you know. And so, and it's not in an unethical way. It's just how we're wired as people. So rather than hate that or shun that and say, well, I'm not going to do that and I'm just going to do my job and too bad, I would encourage you to think about it in a different way, because it's only going to limit you if you have that point of view, which from the many, many, many conversations I have coaching people, that is the point of view many people have. So we can ease your way into networking, because when I started, when I moved in from sales in-house, I remember having this conversation with my manager and I was like, what am I going to say to these senior leaders? They're busy. They don't want to talk to me, and so on and so forth. I made every excuse, but it was really because I was nervous. But again, you can be nervous, you can have fear and be courageous at the same time. So those leaders, their job, again, especially if you're more senior in the organization, their number one job is talent, because you're doing the work, right? The people on the teams are doing the work. It's their job to set the strategy and get the right people on the team and get them on board to get the job done. So when you connect with those people, you should know that if you're performing well and you're amazing, they're going to want to talk to you. Just remember that. And remember that no one has all the answers. I used to hold people in such high regard, and many people I still do. But once you get a little peek behind the curtain, adults many times are big kids, and we're all guessing. No one knows. No one knows if the strategy is going to work, if the investment on that company worked, if the acquisition worked. You just have to have a perspective, have a conviction, and move forward. And as you learn, then you'll course correct. So don't hold people in such a high regard that you think you're so beneath them they wouldn't even want to speak to you, because they're figuring it out just the same as you are. They just might be further along, and they'll be happy to help you with that. So the first tip is to go to the cafeteria. I know you can't do that now, but when I moved inside again, I was a worker bee. And so I would just sit at my desk and bring my lunch, and I wouldn't really leave the desk all day. I never went to the cafeteria. I never went and met with people unless I actually had a meeting. And a few times I'd forget my lunch, or I didn't cook, I was lazy, and I'd go to the cafeteria, and everyone was in the cafeteria. So the president, the VP of marketing, who I really needed to hire me, some other people, like other peers. And that's, this proverbial water cooler. You have to be in the mix for people to be thinking of you. And that's where you hear what's happening in the organization. And so someone would say, hey, Elisa, oh, I thought of you. I wanted to ask this question about such and such product, or how was your weekend? And you might stand there waiting for a sandwich and talk to the VP for 5 minutes or 2 minutes. That's part of exposure. That was like one of the biggest things I did that year, was stop working for the 30 minutes to go to the cafeteria. And when you think of this pie moving forward, you want to keep checking in with yourself. Are you just being a worker bee, or are you taking the time to go and connect? And you might feel guilty, like, well, that's not what they're paying me to do, and I need to just do my job. But everything happens around those conversations and those connections. Another really easy one is to keep in touch with former supervisors and colleagues. I can tell you how many people that I've coached or managed before that still reach out to me, and then a big group of them that don't, even when I message them and say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? I want to help you. And perhaps they're getting coaching elsewhere, that's fine. But I just think it's a lost opportunity if you don't do that. And you don't need to make it so formal. You can, let's say you see an article about something they mentioned, say, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. Or if you want an award, you can send that to the leader and say, hey, I really want to thank you for the feedback you gave me 5 years ago. You don't know how much that shaped me. And you're keeping in touch. It should be genuine on your behalf. And you really make that person feel better, and you stay top of mind. The other recommendation I have is around employee resource groups. So, I know at my organization, they have them across different, for different ethnicities or races, and women's groups, military veterans. Join and lead in those groups. If you're part of a big multinational company, or not, the company's investing in those areas for a reason, to make the environment more inclusive. And oftentimes they have senior people that are sponsoring them. So again, there's a leader, there's you, they're looking for talent. And now you have this perfect marriage where you're working within a smaller microcosm in the organization, where you're going to get exposure to those leaders and really be able to shape the organization and make it a better place. So I did a lot of networking, and still do, through those resource groups. Lastly on this one is make sure you're connecting with every leader in your function or your area. So when I was in sales, we would have national meetings or sometimes regional meetings a few times a year. And a lot of people go and they can't wait. They want to see their friends, and they want to gossip and go to drink and so on and so on. And that's fine. But I wouldn't go talk to my friends until I went around the room at every break and I connected with every manager, just to say hi, to take the time to go over, let them know what I was working on. It's a 5-minute conversation. Why? Well, because all of those leaders are responsible for who gets promoted, who gets raises, who gets the next opportunity or stretch assignment. And they have people on their teams that they're vying for. So what you want to do, at least, is make it easier for your manager who's trying to put you forth for things, so that if they say, hey, I think Pam is really wonderful, it's going to be a very bad day if someone on the leadership team says, I don't know Pam, or what did Pam do this whole last year? Sorry, Pam. You're the first name that came to mind. So that's easy. Those are safe spaces. You could also go and ask them for help on a project or their perspective on something. So those are small areas where it should be less risky and maybe less nerve-wracking for you to try to just dip your toe in the water. And it may feel like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. So there's really, back to it, there's no shortcuts. If your desire is that you want to go further in your career and you want to have a big impact, you can't really circumvent these things. You can, but I think it'll make it much, much harder. So I'm going to share my little secret sauce here on what I say when I want to network with an individual. So once we were at a meeting, and someone that was pretty senior, they were like very high level VP, and they gave a presentation about what we were doing for the future of our organization, about the aging population and so on. And remember, I mentioned before, I was really passionate about health. I did my whole juicing thing. And so I had a different perspective than him. And so I went up to him after the meeting. And I just thought, hey, I really appreciated your presentation. I resonate with that area. I'm just wondering, what are we doing about holistic healthcare, right? I know we're treating people after they're sick, but are we doing anything proactively or preventative? I think he appreciated that I came up to him with a point of view. And I said, do you mind, I know you're really busy, but do you mind if we connect? I want to learn more about the project. And also, I'd love your thoughts about my career path. He's like, yeah. And so we met, and we continued to meet quarterly. And they've gone on to be a chairperson and a chairman in the organization, which is a really good connection to have. Again, you couldn't reverse engineer this, but if I see an opportunity to network with someone, I truly was genuinely interested in the project. So I don't do this to everyone. I just had a real genuine interest. I go up and I shoot my shot, because that's how things get done, again, is around connections with people. And I think I have a perspective that's going to help make that project better potentially. So you can do different, shape this in different ways, but this is primarily how I do it. And remember, leaders, if they're a good leader, are focused on people, on developing people and developing talent. And so you're not bothering them. Have some confidence in yourself that you're helping to solve a problem that they need. And it's going to be a great thing. And if you enroll them, so the other thing that makes 30 minutes go by really fast when you're speaking with them is to ask them about their career path. And they will talk probably the whole 25 minutes. You'll say a few words and they'll say, yeah, Lisa's a really nice, great person. I'm going to remember that person. They spent most of the time talking about themselves, but I got to learn a lot. And then you could ask them, what would they do if you were you? You could share, and that gives you the opportunity to highlight some of the things you've done. So you want to have a good little elevator speech there. And then you could ask to keep in touch every so often. You don't have to ask, and I think people get taken aback by this. You don't need to ask for a mentor. I tend to let it happen organically. And I'll just say, would you mind if I keep in touch, every few months? And majority of the time they'll say yes. So you can start that with maybe more junior people in the organization before you go and reach more senior levels. But that's how I do it. In summary, I hope that you take away from this that you are in control. And I have had many a day where I want to quit my organization and I think things are not fair and we get frustrated and why are they so slow and so conservative? But when I snap back to it, I remember that I control a lot of this, maybe not at the pace I want or the exact timing I want. But if that's the case, like for me, as I figure out what job do I want next year when I move back to the US, I have to come back over here and make sure that because I had my head down, remember my performance took up more because I was new and I was overwhelmed. I have to start shifting a little bit back in the pie over to make sure I'm getting exposure so people know what I was doing while I was in Singapore. So it's a constant reshifting, but it's a good framework to help you remember what are the pieces that you should keep in mind at all times. So I will close with this quote, and it's a long one, but I love it. I get chills every time. It's by Teddy Roosevelt. For those of us that, and I've struggled with this a lot, worry about what people think of you, and maybe don't want to take risk and want to play it safe. It says, it is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the woman or man who is actually in the arena, who spends herself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if she fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And there's a lot in there, but the main thing I take away from it is I used to be so risk averse and scared to take chances. Move to Singapore? Never, never. But I thought if I live in timidity, then I'll never know victory or defeat. And I don't want to live that life. And so I encourage you all to take risk and be courageous in your careers and in your personal lives, because that's the only way people are going to see you and let you really show up and deliver as your full self. So that's it for me. I think this was lighting up, but I couldn't see all the questions. So I'm going to stop my screen share so I can see. Yeah, thank you.
Elisa, thank you. That was awesome. Even though I had seen your slides and we had met, I still took so much from this. And I think at any point in your career, this is stuff you can really come back to and take from and continue to learn from. So thank you for sharing with us. It seems like our audience agrees because we have some questions and a lot of shout outs and comments and thank yous. But to touch on the questions, I did see someone ask early on if you had any advice for dealing with negative coworkers while still keeping in mind your brand and wanting to keep a positive light.
Yes, I have dealt with a little bit of haterade or two in my day, and I struggle with this because people say don't make yourself smaller for anybody else and be who you are and don't care what people think, but I do care what people think. And I think we should care what people think to a certain extent. So I just focus on being kind and being humble. And so if I was working on something, maybe that got a lot of exposure or something like that, I maybe wouldn't share it with people. And I would just try to make sure that I was continuing to be a team player. So you don't make people feel bad necessarily. So I definitely try to be mindful of those perceptions. if they're negative beyond that, then that's their problem, and I don't lessen who I am in that regard. But I do try to be sensitive to, I would say, perceptions that people might have, and try to work around those.
Thank you. And another question that we got is asking if you have advice for working on being shy. We have someone who is introverted and they struggle with it. Do you have any advice on getting over shyness?
Yeah, I think I've tried to, I've taken a new perspective on this in a way when we talk about diversity and inclusion. Like, obviously I'm more vocal and there might be someone more introverted. And a lot of times in commercial, like big sales driven organizations, an introvert is looked at as a bad thing. And I have really come around on that to see, but that's actually not true. We have to do, but the rest of the people have to do a better job of making sure the introvert feels comfortable speaking, because they probably have amazing ideas. We're just not letting them get out. So one, I would embrace who you are. And then secondly, you can try to do it in small steps. So maybe for you, it's better to do like a coffee with a person and just really get to know them and focus on maybe perhaps those 2 to 3 people rather than a big town hall presentation, for example. And then success breeds success, which breeds more confidence, that I found. And the other part that's been huge in my life is therapy. So, every millennial has a therapist. They like making fun of us about that. However, I've been with her probably for 5 years, and it's changed my life and helped me to really, because I used to be crippled by what people thought of me. And this book, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, was what helped me really step more into myself. So those are my tips for that.
Thanks. And I see another question that came in. Can you talk about your social media presence? Do you separate your personal social media from your professional social media, or do you keep them together so you seem like one whole person?
Yeah. Oh, people have varying opinions about this, but like, I just post a lot. For example, on my Instagram, it's nothing bad, but I'm very silly. I love to dance, and like, or I might be at the beach, right? And I don't want my colleagues to see those pictures. So on Instagram, only friends. And then I do keep a pretty big presence on LinkedIn. And that is the most underutilized tool. LinkedIn is people sleep on that platform, meaning they're not aware of how much you can be doing there. So I definitely post on LinkedIn, and you highly recommend that you do. However, what I've noticed doesn't go well on LinkedIn is when people repost something about the organization. So like, oh, we're so proud, I'm so proud J&J launched XYZ vaccine. What really breaks through is when you share your learnings. So when I said, I'm celebrating 1 year in Singapore, or I'm really, I failed at this project, or I have this interview coming up, I'm nervous. And everyone loves to, like, LinkedIn is such a nice community, and they love to come around you and support you. So LinkedIn, and if you don't want to post, definitely go. I follow all of the leaders, as many as I could find from J&J, and I engage with them and I comment on their posts, because again, I'm getting exposure. Perhaps they might remember my name one day. But yeah, I keep them distinct.
Okay, we have a question that just came in from PJ. Advice on combining different interests with your major. Like you said, excuse me, about health and marketing. I'm studying marketing at TCNJ, but also a dancer.
Okay, so marketing and a dancer. Yeah,
combining interests.
Yeah, I finally, I think, found a sweet spot with that. For example, with the anti-human trafficking thing I was doing, I wanted to quit actually J&J at one point. I was like so frustrated, and I was like, I want to make a difference, and I hate this place. And I did go and start like a food business with my family on the side, like just to see what I could do with it. And I hated it. And I was like, I thought my job was hard. This is miserable. Like, so what the passion was the human trafficking piece and the speaking piece. And then I thought, there's 100,000 people in J&J. If I quit and went to try to be a speaker, if I ever landed J&J as a client, I would cry tears of joy. So why am I shunning what's right in front of me, where I can be reaching all these people who, by the way, have money, right? Who get behind this human trafficking cause, this anti-human trafficking cause, and who want to make a difference and who will listen. And when I embraced that, that is when I began to love my career, love my life. That's where the TEDx thing happened, so on and so forth. So with dancing, you could, I don't mean to minimize what you do, because I'm sure you're an amazing dancer, but is it offering classes at work, or is it just keeping it as a side hustle and teaching classes at night, nighttime or on the weekends? you don't have to shun that part of you. A lot of people are multi-passionate. Look up Marie Forleo. I love her, her podcast, and she talks about being a multi-passionate entrepreneur. But you have to pay the bills. So I'm not the person that's going to tell you go quit and just, live the starving artist life. You can if you have such a passion, but I love that I have a wonderful salary and income, and I can do all of these things on top of it.
Yeah. And who knows who you might meet giving dance lessons? You might meet an amazing marketing professional.
Yeah.
All right, looks like we have one more. What advice do you have for someone who's looking to rebrand their business so that it attracts a younger generation?
Oh, can you ask me again?
One.
Can you ask me again?
What advice do you have for someone who is looking to rebrand their business to attract a younger generation?
Listen. So you can do it yourself, or you can hire a vendor to do like, it's a social listening, and listen into the conversations that people are having, so you can really understand what their need is. I don't think millennials or any other generation is that hard to understand. It's just figuring out what makes them tick. So do that, and also look up design thinking. So there's a design thinking school at Stanford, but there's a lot of resources you can find online, and it'll give you tools to help interview those customers so you can build prototypes and get their feedback before you invest a lot of money. So you make little investments, you test it, and then you fail fast. So don't spend all the money rebranding until you get feedback.
All right, and I'm reading through this this last question comment we have. It's a lengthier one. Okay, so it ends with, what is your take on showing a personal side on professional networks like LinkedIn? It seems like he has been seeing a shift in that during the pandemic, of people sharing a little bit more of a personal glimpse of themselves on a professional network like LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think you have to toe the line. I do it when I can pull in some type of business lesson. I did post, for example, with Black Lives Matter. I very much felt that when George Floyd was murdered, that it was the conversation that needed to be happening in corporate America, and it was happening. And I felt the need, but I did it in my way. I said, you're my amazing community. You've come around me with so much, with human trafficking, with women's empowerment. The Black community is hurting right now. What are our thoughts about this, right? Or my heart grieves with them. I didn't say it in the way other people say it. I'm still true to myself. But 99% of the time, I stick to the personal side of what I'm doing at work. So I launched this project, but what I learned about myself was XYZ. And I just, LinkedIn, you can look at my last few posts. People, they're just so nice. You're going to be wonderful. I posted about this webinar, and it's just a really great community.
All right, thanks. And it says, well, we got another shout out. Well done and thank you. In your opinion, is there a such thing as bad networking?
Oh, yes, actually, yes. I think if you're doing it too much, or like without a specific purpose, I think that could have negative consequence or perception. That would be the only one I can think of. So you want to make sure you're being respectful of people's time,
and that's exactly what he touches on.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we've come to the end of our questions, but certainly feel free if anyone else has additional thoughts or questions. We're still here. Elisa, did you want to share your website one more time? And I know there's a newsletter that folks can sign up for. I have done so myself.
Oh, thank you. I'd love if you all could follow. So I just put in the chat, my website's elisaspeaks.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter. I won't spam you. It comes out about once a month. And I'm documenting my journey. I want to get to be a president one day, or a chairperson of a company. And so I'm documenting all my failures and the things I'm learning through those blog posts. So I'd love if you'd go and subscribe there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was really cool. You were able to share such really valuable advice, but in a very fun way. I know I had fun listening to you, and your story is so interesting. So thank you. We're getting a lot of shout outs and people that say they're part of your fan club. I don't know if you saw that in the chat. Wonderful presentation. And yeah, I agree, it was. So thank you to our audience too for joining in, and stay tuned for more of our industry insiders that will come through in emails and on TCNJ social media. This one will be recorded and available on our website at tcnjalumni.edu/webinars. And so you can revisit this and take away all of the pearls, as Elisa calls them, that she shared with us at your leisure. So Elisa, thank you.
Thanks. Oh, look at all these new subscribers I'm getting. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Oh, look at that. Right in real time.
Right in real time. I'm watching you. No, I'm kidding. Thank you so much for having me. It was like such a privilege and an honor. So I appreciate it.
Well, hopefully you can visit in person when you're back in the States, and
Yeah.
and all of this craziness is over. And stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I hope you have a lot of coffee since you started your day so early with us.
I'm going to go take a nap because it's my birthday weekend. So I'm off. So thank you.
Good for you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.